Right, as we look at the state of politics this week, we know that former President Jacob Zuma indicated that he wouldn't obey the summons to attend the Zondo Commission between the 15th and 19th of this month. It was all after a damning constitutional court judgment compelling him to do so. This sparked several comments from politicians. EFF leader Julius Malema having asked him for tea with the former president. The tea party took place in Zuma's homestead of Inkandla, but nothing about the discussions was placed on record. We also saw the Special Investigating Unit deliver their report on corruption involving PPE in government's fight against COVID-19. Only 127 million rand has been recovered by the unit, although the state spent 30 billion rand for PPE, while 13 billion rand is still under investigation. Joining us to talk about this week in the news is One SA for All founder Mmusi Maimane. Very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. It really has been one of those dramatic news weeks in terms of the political space. Let's start with what we saw with former President Jacob Zuma defying the ConCourt ruling. And what did you make of that? And what does it speak to when it comes to, him having regard for the law and the country's constitution?
Good morning, and good morning to fellow South Africans. President Zuma has always been at least honest about saying that the ANC is above the constitution, that he himself is above the law, and therefore his conduct should not be something that should surprise us. I think as South Africans, we tend to not take people seriously when they say things. President Zuma has stated these things before. Secondly, I think that we live in a country that's without accountability. When political leaders can conduct themselves in this manner across the spectrum, it tells you that the rule of law has disappeared. And then thirdly, I always maintain the view that if we don't have mechanisms to enforce any law, so if I stood up, I said, and a court summoned me and I said I wasn't going to show up, then I must face the consequences. And as it happens to Zondo Commission, I think all former leaders of the ANC must appear. State capture is an investigation into the ANC. We shouldn't call it any other thing. And President Zuma, like any other president, should be entitled to be equal before the law like any other citizens, and he should turn out. In my humble opinion, I think that if we fail to act against him, then none of us as citizens should ever comply with any law in the country.
What did you make of President Cyril Ramaphosa's response when he was asked about, his views on former President Jacob Zuma? I mean, he spoke about how he needs time and space to apply his mind. Is this really what a sitting president should be saying about a very public defiance on the ruling by the highest court in the land?
The remarks by the president are most disappointing and, in fact, consistent with he himself also, in the sense that citizens at this time want to know that any person who becomes the head of state will defend the constitution and all its related laws. That's the oath of office. So when the president says the former president needs time to think, I wish all criminals in this country needed time to think. They must think whether they must arrive in court or not. And if there's a charge against President Zuma, he must appear. And so I don't think there should be a debate as to when he'd like to think about it or not. We must ensure that there's accountability. Because if we are creating situations where every situation that pertains to the law must be politically managed, then it means that any citizen should be able to negotiate politically anything that is an infringement against the law. So I think President Ramaphosa is dodging responsibility. He has responsibility as an elected representative of our country. He has a responsibility to be the first one to say, let us uphold the rule of law in our country. If he can't do that, then I fail to understand, as I said earlier, that why any citizen should listen to it. And secondly, why should we have him as head of state? Because simply if he can't protect the related laws of our republic, then who will?
In reading between the lines, what does this now say about President Cyril Ramaphosa's leadership positioning within the ruling party and as leader of the country?
It's clear that he fundamentally believes that his tenure is dependent on keeping the peace in the ANC and rather than leading South Africa. That's the first thing. The second thing is he's clear that he doesn't hold the power within his own party. And thirdly, that is not accountable to the people. This is the fundamental basis why I believe we need a grassroots movement, why One South Africa exists, is because the people, we are sitting, this is what President Zuma's allegations are, have got nothing to do with the ANC's money. They've got everything to do with public money. And the ANC's stealing, in this instance, where there's been state capture, has got everything to do with public money. Therefore, it tells you that if political principles are not willing to be accountable to citizens, this is a crisis. And I really believe we need to get back to a space where people know that we, the people, cannot continue like this. We need the power to hold political principles accountable. And it would be a good time now to be able to look at the state of our nation and say, is the ANC fit to lead going forward? Because clearly they can't protect the laws. The only thing they seem hell-bent on protecting is themselves. And I think all of us as a country and as a nation, we need to realize that we need a fresh leadership that will take the interests of the citizens above the interest of its own political formations.
Another big newsmaker this week was that spectacle caused around the Tea Party with former President Jacob Zuma and EFF leader Julius Malema. And, reporters lined up outside Nkandla to get a sense of what transpired in that meeting, only to be told that it was a tea party. It was nice, it was sweet, and nothing more to it. What were your thoughts and feelings around that?
I think it was a good episode of Utatako, in the sense that this is a situation upon which, if you reflect on this, President Zuma and Mr. Malema have had a long relationship together. They've permanently been engaged and have worked together ever since. So again, to me, as South Africans, we need to treat it as political allies working together. The only fundamental interest we should be asking, because we can't meddle in the Tea Party. We can't hold on to the Tea Party as it's the solution to our problems. If friends get together, they plot the way how they politicize the situation, it is their choice. So I didn't read much into the situation, except the realignment of politics, where those like Mr. Malema and Mr. Zuma, who advance certain positions where the rule of law doesn't uphold, where they want to postpone elections, all that kind of conduct, they must be able to get together and have discussions themselves. Our stance should be, what are the institutions of the state that need to protect the interests of all citizens? Do we need to ensure that actually, where there's a need for prosecution to take place, there must be one? Do we need to ensure that the institutions such as Parliament, etc., act in the manner that they were elected to do? Because if we carry on politically meddling in what is essentially legal processes, we're going to end up with a banana republic. So to me, I just saw a family reunion, and I think that it is well within the rights of Mr. Malema and Mr. Zuma to get together and have tea anytime they like.
And another big talking point was that SIU report, where it was found that only 127 million rand had been recovered by this unit for corruption revolving PPE. And of course, the state had spent obviously a lot more, 30 billion rand for PPE, while 13 billion rand is under investigation. Lots of question marks there. And of course, really just leaving much to one's imagination on how this process will eventually unfold and whether or not we'll see some serious action against the perpetrators.
Yeah, I mean, we are all feeling disempowered. I read the report, and you can't help but feel that the establishment of the PPE tenders was really an initiation of a feeding frenzy for politically connected people and their companies. The tragedy behind it is that it happens in the midst of when, as you've just reported, over 46,000 South Africans have died. So the charge should not only be a question of looting, it should furthermore be those who helped allow our citizens to die. That is the question. It is the moral question that those who are involved in this PPE scandal must ask themselves. Furthermore, I think that South Africa's investment into not only the SIU, but the National Prosecuting Authority and the National Director of Public Prosecutions requires more strengthening. Our ability to police people, to be able to ensure that investigations don't take too long, that in fact people who are arrested, who act against citizens must be arrested quickly, is taking a lot longer. And that's why criminals feel they've got impunity. My stance on the situation is that if we are to change South Africa, is we must ensure that not only as an SIU proclamation that has been taken from the presidency, the law makes it possible to appoint multiple SIU investigations as they go. And then furthermore, we need to get public and private prosecutions on the table. So we need to ask for lawyers and advocates across the country to be able to create a scenario where we can publicly prosecute more and more people. And that thirdly, once we've done that particular exercise, that we expedite all of that. I'd rather see our jails filled with people who have looted and allowed for people to die in this time more than anyone else. So it's a time now that we need to act swiftly, because if you don't, the vaccine rollout is coming up next. And what next? We all have already our fears. And furthermore, South Africa is heading towards a fiscal cliff. So this is a time that we cannot waste any resource. And again, political leadership has failed. The ANC itself has failed. So it is time we take the power back as the people.
You mentioned vaccine rollout, and we know that President Cyril Ramaphosa last month spoke about how the vaccine rollout pie essentially is not going to. There's not going to be much for business in South Africa because of the processes that are being followed, and how the last end bit will be the distribution to the different sectors and how they'll utilize those opportunities. What's your stance on that part, where business is wanting to have a piece of this pie, but the opportunities are limited?
No, and I think that what Mr. Ramaphosa is saying in this instance could not be further along. The procurement of vaccines is but one exercise. The rollout of vaccines is the second one, which is the more complicated part. Because if to procure something is the easy, that the rollout and distribution and making sure that there aren't people who get multiple dosages to ensure that it is accurate, it is brought to the right communities, is important. And I think that the stance towards business in this instance cannot be one of adversarial. We need to find the best logistics across the country and ensure that there's delivery of vaccines to everybody. Because if we depend on the government mechanisms, we've seen how they do food parcels. We've seen how they do social grants. We've seen how they do other elements. So there's no confidence in that. We're in the middle of a crisis. If I lead this country, my only question on the table is what are the available resources across both public and private? And let's ensure that we can effectively deliver vaccines at the speed that we need to deliver them. The 1 million that were delivered the other day, we should see an immediate program upon which healthcare workers are able to get that vaccine going forward. It should have been done. It is an urgent situation. And so government's logistics do not work. And my argument is let's partner with all sectors, those who are running effective and ethical business. Let's ensure that we deliver. This is a missed opportunity. This was a crisis that could make President Ramaphosa become the leader that I think South Africa desperately thought he was. But the net consequence of what's happened is that it's demonstrated the fact that when it's mattered, he's chosen the ANC, and when it needed action, he didn't take any. So to me, I think we really, in the typical sense, have a sitting president rather than an acting president.
Thank you so much for your time. We're going to have to leave it there. That was One South Africa for All founder Mmusi Maimane, giving us a sense of the week that was in terms of the big political stories.